Hello and welcome to another edition of Sun Dragon Tips and Tricks. I'm Rebecca. I'm the owner of Sun Dragon Art and Fiber in downtown Brevard, North Carolina. And it's Monday, so I'm at my house and I'm bringing you another video. I thought I would talk about socks today. And then I left the best example of a sock that I wanted to talk about at the shop. Disclaimer, socks are not my forte. And if I do an overview on them, it'll be some super basic stuff that some people who are really experienced at socks might take some issues with, but that will be to get people ready for if they've never tried a sock before, some things about that. So today I thought what we could do is another sweater video, another basics of how sweaters are shaped or what goes into a lot of patterns. So either you know what you're heading into, or if you're trying to design your own, you have some grounded skills for this. Now, you're not going to learn how to make a sweater sleeve from this video, but it is meant to just give you some general guidelines of how a lot of sleeves are shaped. And when I say that, I mean the traditional sleeve. Like this one, it's a little short, but whoop. So these sleeves, I could have made them a little longer. They were a little tight too, but this thing running down the bottom, this is a very fuzzy yarn, so it's a little hard to tell. But what a lot of people may not know going into sweater knitting is that sleeves are not straight. Believe it or not, your arms are not the same circumference all the way down, and most sweater patterns take that into account. If they were straight, they'd actually look kind of bell-bottomed, which, if you want, is a good thing to know how to do. So if you want flared sleeves, you might not have to increase. You might just want to not decrease. And that language is super specific to sleeves that are going top down. So we'll look at some basics of this. This will not go over everything. But if you'd like to see a follow-up on something, please let me know in the comments and I'll do what I can. I always have a disclaimer that I will make videos if I feel I am well-versed enough to approach the topic. I don't want to make a video that I don't have enough knowledge for, so I will be leading you astray. I'm going to speak as much as I can from personal experience when I make these videos. So let's get to it. All right, this video is about sleeve shaping. Being very specific, we've already talked about shoulder shaping, and I've done that in another video. And that can actually affect how your sleeves look. So I'm going to try to avoid, for the most part, talking about the very tops of sleeves. We'll get to this in a second. I am talking about where it hits the underarm down. But I will address a little bit of what you will see in sweaters if you're looking at some very basic patterns. So the classic pieced sweater where you make 4 pieces and you sew them together. A classic pieced sweater, you make separate sections. You would make a front, back, 2 sleeves, and sew everything. If you make a classic pieced sweater, you're going to be making a flat sleeve and sewing it up to go from here to here. Now, try not to fall into the trap of I only have the sleeves left, I'm almost done. Because this is sometimes almost as much knitting as the front piece or the back piece itself, because it's got to wrap all the way around your sleeve. A classic pieced sweater often looks like this. It is inset, but how this gets to that, it's a little bit crazy. So a pieced sweater, which may not be exactly what we're going to focus on today, but it's good to know about, is often knit bottom up and allows us to start talking about the pieces of a sleeve. There's the cuff, which is often ribbed. There's the body of the sleeve itself. And then there's often what's called the cap of a sleeve. And this may look like a really weird shape, but it's meant to fit into the other pieced shapes. So let's see if I can color code this just a little bit. What will happen with a bottom up, it's tapered. The area at your wrist tends to be smaller than the area up by your shoulder. So when you're knitting bottom up, you will have increases, usually along either edge. And part of that is because those edges are going to be hidden when you're wearing the sweater. for the most part. Then you will notice in the instructions for a classic pieced sweater, there will often be a sharp decrease. And that will take you drastically in on either side. And then there will be some gentler decreases to shape this cap. Like, think about a rounded cap like you wear on your head. Then there will be a final set of decreases, and sometimes it's more than one. So that is the shaping of a classic pieced bottom-up sweater. So how does that fit into when you actually are sewing it in place? Usually the seam line with those increases is along the underside of the sleeve, and they'll be close to each other when this is circled around. So essentially what you're going to do is you're going to bring both of these sides inside to meet. It's going to curl around. And when you sew it and sew it into the shoulder, your increases go along this bottom edge here. That flat, sharp decrease works for your underarm right there. The gentle decreases actually help it fit, nestle into the shoulder socket that the sweater has set up for you. And those final decreases go across the top. It's a little bit of an art form to sew that in so it fits. And I have videos on how to do seaming where you have tops and sides and crazy things meeting. But that is the classic piece sweater. Now, the much more popular version currently is the top down in the round sweater. So this one is knit top down. Starts up here. So it's attached to the whole body of it. What happens is you start knitting, you knit the yoke, the whole top part. You end up what's called separating the sleeves. Let's put another arrow in here for knitting the yoke. Usually the instructions will tell you to continue knitting the torso. Let's put some numbers on this. Knitting the yoke would be step 1. Separating the sleeves would be step 2. Knitting the torso would be step 3. And then you would go back and do your sleeves. You would take them off the stitch holders and knit the sleeves. But the same idea is you knit down on the sleeves and evenly spaced, you do decreases. And then finally you knit the cuff. Now, if you didn't do decreases, but still decreased significantly so the cuff was nice and tight, you would end up with very puffy sleeves. If you didn't decrease for your cuffs, you would end up with probably even bell-bottomy looking sleeves. So what we're going to talk about for the rest of this video is how some of this looks and what you might do to create those increase or decrease. I really want to talk about the rest of this as a top-down sweater, since that is more popular. For a bottom-up, for a pieced sweater, you may just have to reverse the instructions. Or if you'd like, I can make a separate video about it. But we're going to talk about when you're doing one of those top-down sweaters. The view of this is if you're looking at the underarm, the side that's going to be pressed against your side. And one of the reasons to look at it from this side is this is where all the shaping happens, in essence, so it can be secret. So the average person looking at you won't see all the work that's going on. All of these stitches around the back side here, up to these little markers I made, these are all the stitches that were on your stitch holder that it's going to tell you to take from the stitch holder when you separated the sleeves back at the beginning of the sweater. And it asks you to put those back on your circular needle. Those are the stitches. Oh, I went off my little picture. The stitches from the yoke that are held on the stitch holder that it's going to say, put those back on the needle. And then it's going to want you to bridge the gap. It's probably going to want you to pick up stitches from the torso. When you made the torso, you probably added on stitches. I have plans to make a sleeve separation video for y'all when I get to the sleeve separation on one of my sweaters, so I can demonstrate it for y'all. I don't have that set up right now. But the underarm, this would be the center of the underarm. This spot here is going to be where you pick up stitches from the underarm of the body of the sweater. The instructions may have told you when you were knitting your torso to cast on, once you separated your sleeve onto a stitch holder, to cast on to kind of bridge the gap to create the area of your underarm on your sweater. So when you go back to do the sleeves, you're going to pick up stitches from that area to create a full circle of stitches. Then it's probably going to tell you to place a beginning of round marker. And often it will want you to put that in the middle of the underarm, and that's the most hidden spot. We want all of the things that we need to do to make this a correct shape of a sleeve to be as close to the beginning of round marker as possible so they won't be noticed from the outside. So this dotted line is your beginning of round. I'm going to have to move some of our writing up top to make room for what I'm putting down here. Let's try to make it so we can still see it. All right, so that's our beginning of round all the way around. And how it's going to work to shape this guy is it's going to tell you to knit a certain number of rows, and then it's going to tell you to decrease and to evenly space them out. And usually, if we're knitting in this direction, the direction of knitting, if that's going down, that means we are decreasing. We're taking out stitches as we go down to give it a tapered look, to actually make it look like it's straight. So about honestly, in a lot of patterns, it depends on the size you're making, how often it's going to tell you to decrease. It could be every 8 rows, every 6 rows. If you're designing your own sweater, this could be something you have to play around with. And it could tell you to do it a bunch of times. So this is row 8. Let's take every 8 rows. On row 8, you would decrease. On row 16, on row 24, on row 32, on row 40. You're going to decrease. And how that's going to look is they will usually tell you 1 stitch from the edge or 1 stitch in from the beginning of round. They will lead you through decreases on either side so they kind of point in. So they point in. And often that is done through on one side. On this side, you're going to do a slip, slip, knit. And on the other side, you're going to do a knit 2 together. And if you don't like how that looks, you can reverse them. It really depends on which stitch you want lying on top. The difficulty with this is we're thinking about it upside down, because when you hold it knitting, this whole thing is going to be flipped around. But what it often will tell you to do is at the beginning of a row, do a knit 2 together, and at the end of the row, do a slip, slip, knit. That makes the decrease lean in different directions. So when you're looking, if you flip this over and you're looking at the stitches as you would make them, say this is our beginning of round marker right here. Doing this one on the fly, right? 1 stitch in from the edge. The next stitch, if you do a knit 2 together, the next stitch will have the second stitch lying on top. It'll look like it slants this way. And if you knit around and when you come, so this is a knit 2 together. And when you come all the way around to the other side, if you want it looking like it leans in the other direction, where you have the first stitch on top instead of the second, hiding another one under there, you have to do a slip, slip, knit or something equivalent. There are a few other ones that are equivalent. So there's my on the fly versions of this. Has a knit 2 together, which leans that way, and this has a slip, slip, knit, which leans the other way. and they look like they're kind of arrowing in towards each other. That can be a really effective tool to use for decreases on a sleeve. And then when you get to the length you want, minus however long your cuff is going to be. Some people do short cuffs and some people do really long cuffs. So the cuff down here usually doesn't have any shaping in it. You get down to how wide you want the cuff to be and you go straight. Another thing I'll point out in this drawing I made, often for a traditional length, not cropped, not super long, for a traditional length sweater, believe it or not, the sleeves are longer. And another thing to be aware of is how someone writes a sweater, the number of decreases you go through, you may end up with super long sleeves. Everybody's arms are different lengths, so it can be really important to adapt that for yourself. That could mean even ripping it back and doing your decreases every 7 rows instead of every 8 rows. Let's take a look at a couple of examples I have here at the house. I don't have many sweaters home today, but I can show you some of what this top-down decrease stuff looks like. So here I am in my easy Eyelet yoke cardigan. Try to settle it down a little bit. And if we look, I made my sleeves kind of short, but the underarm here, so here is where I picked up stitches. When you pick them up well, they can be pretty fairly hidden. It can almost look like it's continuous if you pick them up well. And I think I have a video on picking up stitches. I'll have to check. But here's where I picked up the stitches for the underarm. And the rest of the arm looks like it just carries on from the yoke, because that's what I did. I put them on a holder and then I put them back on here. And all the decreases, let's see, can you see how it looks like it's arrowing in along this line which runs down the inside of my arm? So when I'm wearing this, you don't see it because it's against my arm. It's down there. If I hold this up, you can see how it looks like things are coming in this way. And with this fuzzy yarn, it's really hard to see my decreases. It just looks like the stitches meld into this center line. But I can bet you that I was making stitches just like I was demonstrating in the written part, in the drawing part. This is my Kordy sweater, which really should still be blocking. Still a little damp. I was blocking it today, but I brought it down so I could show you with slightly crisper stitches, although I have been wearing this sweater for about a week before I blocked it. So there's some fuzzies, right? But you can see, getting this up on the table, you can see at regular intervals, I can spot there's a decrease, and here's another one, and here's another one. They're at really regular intervals. And if we look right across from them, we can see the others. One was done at the beginning of the row, and one was done at the end. But they point in towards each other. This one points this way, and this one points the other way. Let's see if I can get... If we start way up, here's the underarm. It's a little more noticeable because I have looser stitches. But then there we have them. This is a knit 2 together, and when you come back around to the other side, it's a slip slip knit. And every 8 rows, I did it again. Right there. And I did it until the pattern said I had the right number of stitches. And usually at that point in the pattern, it'll say, now keep going until you have the right length. I had basically the right length, if not a little long for the right length for my arms by the last decrease. So I just went right on to the next section. But you can see how it gently, for this one, goes in right around that beginning of round marker. So I hope you found this informative and helpful for setting you on your path to make sleeves and be successful in making sleeves. And if you do a pattern that says, here's what you should do for a sleeve, you can understand what it's telling you to do as you dive in. That's really the point of a lot of these videos. If you'd like to see a video on a different topic, if you'd like me to explain more on a certain thing, I might be able to do that in the comments. It might warrant a whole nother video. Let's see what happens. But please let this help you not be intimidated by a sweater pattern, or maybe encourage you to dive in and do your own. I don't do a lot of from scratch sweaters myself. I tend to use patterns, but I know enough to potentially tweak them. My arms are shorter. I might need to go back and do decreases a little faster. It all depends on you and your shape. And one of the lovely things about knitting is that you can alter things. You can play around with things. You can see if it works or not. And if not, try it again. Rip it out. Or if you don't like ripping stuff out, start over with fresh yarn. Please consider subscribing to this channel if you haven't already. Suggest things for videos if you'd like. I'll do them if I feel I am well versed enough to do so. If you'd like to support the work in making these videos, then you can go over to patreon.com/sundragon and you can sign up for a monthly subscription to help us make this work possible. We really appreciate it if you can at least give this a thumbs up, comment on it. All the things help those lovely YouTube algorithms. And as we always like to say, may your crafting be filled with joy and confidence. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye. Hello, baby. Are you enjoying my leftovers? Yes. Yarn and sun. What more could you ask for, right? Yes, baby.